This channel is all about philosophy. Now, in case you don't know, Derrida is the French philosopher that made the word deconstruction famous. What happened was, the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, in the book Being and Time, proposed the destruction of the metaphysical tradition. Derrida comes along, takes up the project, and uses the word deconstruction, as he realizes that it will be more of a desedimentation, more of a deconstruction than a destruction of the metaphysical tradition. And once he uses that word takes off. It catches like wildfire and spreads everywhere. Everything is deconstruction. Now, in the book that we're dealing with here, Margins of Philosophy, Derrida does essentially the same thing. In the chapter entitled White Mythology, Derrida is discussing someone, Anatole France, who is criticizing the metaphysicians. Anatole France is saying that the metaphysicians are effacing the development and history of words, metaphors, and concepts. And in the process, they are creating a mythology. They are creating an anemic mythology. Now, Derrida says this does indeed define a problem for us, but Derrida changes, once again, he changes one word. Instead of calling it an anemic mythology, Derrida dubs it white mythology. Now the question is, do you think that Derrida intended for the phrase white mythology to spread just as quickly and be just as ubiquitous as the word deconstruction? It's possible. Let us read an example of white mythology. What I'm going to be talking about is a comedy bit by Aries Spears. There is a clip, video clip entitled Africans Don't Like Blacks, which you can easily find on YouTube. So I'm not going to display any pictures or clips of it here. Now, the first thing that we notice about this clip is that the conclusion is presented first. And when the conclusion is presented first, you know that there must be another objective other than reaching the conclusion. So he tells us that Africans don't like blacks. And then he presents the premise. The premise is presented after the conclusion. And it's presented after the conclusion because he doesn't want to discuss the premise. The premise won't lead to the conclusion. So there's no discussion of the premise. And the premise is white mythology. But, he tells us, they like whites. White mythology will envelop the entire interpretation. The conclusion, which has already been presented, is conditioned by white mythology. How do we know that Africans don't like blacks? Because they don't treat blacks the way they treat whites. And blacks are entitled to be treated exactly the same way that whites are. It becomes a story of blacks being deprived of something that they are entitled to. And that will justify what comes next. The attempt to guilt and shame Africans into subordinating themselves to the group and accepting their place at the very bottom of a racial hierarchy. There's white, then brown, not black, brown, white mixed with black, brown, and then at the very bottom, there's midnight, the furthest away from the light, blacker than black. Since subordination of others to the group is the goal, white mythology is the mock trial that convinces others to accept their guilt and shame. White mythology means no other interpretation is necessary. Social, historical, economic, cultural, None of those types of interpretations are necessary. The logic of white mythology is unassailable. We have the exact same cultural history and development as whites. Therefore, we are entitled to everything that whites possess. And since there's only one difference between whites and us, skin color, it means that if we don't receive everything the whites receive, we're being discriminated against. White mythology makes analysis unnecessary. But what if we didn't reach the conclusion before engaging in discussion or analysis? The event, which many blacks appear to relate to, is the fact that Africans casually but blatantly display dislike, disdain, and disapproval. They casually but almost aggressively attempt to convey that you have no value whatsoever. Now, could this be explained away as culture shock? Or perhaps it's a native-born, foreign-born issue, where the foreign-born simply need to become accustomed to native habits. Or maybe it's simply an issue of the socially acclimated needing to instruct the unacclimated about social expectations, customs, and norms. Say to them, look, this is America. It's okay if you don't like some people, but in America, when you're dealing with someone that you don't like, remain expressionless, avoid eye contact, treat them with the absolute minimum of courtesy. And when they walk away, once their backs are turned, then you let it all out. Maybe it's not a problem of opposition at all. Maybe it's a problem of similarity. Maybe it's a cultural trait which we share, a common cultural trait from a shared cultural heritage. What happens when a black person meets another black person who hasn't subordinated himself to the group?